All right, strap in, everyone. Today's deep dive, well, we're going deep into simultaneous kidney and pancreas transplants. We've got medical reports, patient notes, the whole shebang. And let me tell you, I'm already seeing some pretty fascinating stuff in here. The more I dig into this, the more I realize it's not just about the surgery itself, it's really about giving people their lives back. Imagine living with both diabetes A and D kidney failure, needing dialysis and insulin all the time, and then suddenly you're free.
It's true. I mean, what this procedure does is try to tackle both those major health problems at once. Diabetes, end-stage renal failure, the whole 9 yards. Mostly it's for folks with type 1 diabetes, but sometimes type 2 patients can get it too. The big goal, basically to cure both conditions.
Whoa, hold on there. Cure is a pretty strong word. Does that mean after the transplant, the diabetes just poof, gone,
Yeah.
back to normal life?
It's more like, imagine you're running a marathon every day, and then suddenly you're just taking a brisk walk. Life gets a whole lot easier, for sure. But you still got to be careful. You know what I mean?
Mm.
The transplant, it usually means no more dialysis, no more insulin shots. But it's not like a magic wand that makes all the problems disappear. Some things, like eye damage, they might not be reversed. So even after a successful transplant, doctors would still be checking, looking for any signs that the diabetes is trying to creep back.
Gotcha. So it's like a brand new car, right? Awesome upgrade, but you got to stay on top of maintenance. Speaking of which, this whole limited number of transplant centers thing, that really makes you realize how specialized this whole procedure is. And that brings us to the big question. Where do these new organs actually come from? We're talking live donors versus deceased donors.
Each one has its own pros and cons. With a live donor, it's like a relay race. The faster that organ gets to its new home, the better its chances.
Makes sense.
Less handling time for the organ, which can mean better function once it's in the body.
Okay, less time on the sidelines, more time in the game. Got it. But what about organs from deceased donors?
Deceased donors, well, they offer something pretty remarkable, especially when they're donating both a kidney and a pancreas. We're talking about the potential to actually cure the underlying diabetes.
Wait, hold on a second. You're telling me a new pancreas from a deceased donor can make diabetes disappear? How does that work?
Think of it like your body's lost its internal thermostat for sugar. This new pancreas comes in, it's like installing a brand new one. Your body can finally control blood sugar again, naturally. Usually you don't need insulin injections anymore. And the risk of all those long-term complications goes way down.
Okay, that is seriously impressive. But one thing I noticed in these patient notes is how they talk about examining the transplanted kidney super carefully, like extra gently. Why is that?
Think of a transplanted organ like a delicate plant. It needs a lot of TLC to thrive in its new home. They're more sensitive, easier to injure than organs that have always been there. Plus, with a pancreas transplant, they often put it in the pelvis.
The pelvis.
Yep, not its usual spot. So, got to be extra careful.
Okay, now this is the part that had me scratching my head. This whole draining the pancreas into the bladder thing. Seriously, why on earth would they ever do that? And, more importantly, why did they stop?
Well, back in the day, you got to remember, monitoring for rejection was a big problem. They didn't have the fancy tools we have today. Draining the pancreas into the bladder, well, that let doctors check the urine. They were looking for an enzyme that signaled rejection.
Wow. Talk about going to extremes. You'd think they could have come up with something a little less, well, messy. So what do they do now?
Thankfully, medical science moved on. Now they use blood tests. Much easier. They can check for signs of rejection that way.
Thank goodness for that. I can only imagine how uncomfortable that old method must have been for patients. Now, these notes also mention something called islet cell transplantation, like it's another option. What's the difference between that and a full pancreas transplant?
Islet cell transplantation. It's like a mini version of a pancreas transplant. It's less invasive, for sure. They take the insulin-producing cells from a donor pancreas and put them right into the recipient's liver.
So instead of swapping out the whole organ, they're just targeting the specific cells causing the problem.
Exactly. But gotta be honest, it's not a perfect solution. It doesn't have as high a success rate as a full pancreas transplant, and patients might still need to take some insulin.
So it's a trade-off, huh? Less invasive, but maybe not as effective?
That's right. And that's why it's so important for the patient and the doctors to really talk it through. They got to weigh all the options and figure out the best approach for each person.
Wow. This deep dive is showing me there's way more to this procedure than I ever realized.
It really highlights how complex transplant medicine is and all the incredible progress we've made. And we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. It makes you think about all the work that goes into giving people a chance at a healthier life. One thing that stuck with me from the patient notes is how they mentioned checking for signs of diabetes even after a successful transplant.
Yeah, that's really important. Even with a new pancreas doing its thing, it's not like the body forgets it ever had diabetes.
Right.
Doctors need to keep an eye out just in case.
I see. So it's more about ongoing management, even with a transplant that went well.
Exactly. It's all about making sure the patient gets the best care for the long haul.
Okay, that makes total sense. Now, going back to the types of transplants for a minute, we touched on live donor versus deceased donor, but I'm curious about the details. Like, what are the real pros and cons of each?
Well, we talk about how with a live donor, the organ gets there faster, which is a big plus.
Mm.
But there's also the emotional side of things.
Right, of course.
Getting an organ from someone, a family member, a friend, that could be really powerful.
I can only imagine. But what about the risks for the person who donates? Giving up an organ can't be easy.
True, any surgery has risks, but donating a kidney is generally considered safe. They do a whole bunch of tests beforehand to make sure the donor is healthy enough. It's not something they take lightly.
That's good to know. And what about the other side, the deceased donors?
Deceased donation is incredible. It can potentially help so many people because the organs go to whoever needs them most. But there's the waiting list and the not knowing when an organ might become available.
So there's a lot to consider. No easy answers.
Definitely. It's a big decision, a personal one, and it's something that should always be talked about openly and honestly with the doctors.
You said before that a combined kidney and pancreas transplant from a deceased donor can actually cure the diabetes for good. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. Why is that the case, and why might it not work the same way with just a new kidney?
Okay, so think about it this way. With type 1 diabetes, the body's own immune system attacks those insulin-producing cells in the pancreas, like they're the enemy. When you replace both the kidney and the pancreas from a deceased donor, it's kind of like giving the person a whole new immune system.
Wow.
And this new one won't attack the new pancreas.
That's pretty wild. It's like hitting the reset button on the whole system. So where does this new pancreas go? Does it just hang out where the old one was?
Usually they put it in the pelvis.
The pelvis.
It might seem weird because that's not where it usually is, but it's easier to get to surgically, and it's more protected there.
Huh, interesting. How do they even connect it to everything else?
Oh, the surgeons, they carefully connect the blood vessels and the ducts of the new pancreas to the person's existing systems. It's like a super delicate plumbing job.
Hold on, gotta ask, what happens to the old pancreas? Do they take it out?
Nope, they usually just leave it in there. It doesn't cause any problems, and taking it out would just make the surgery more complicated.
So you end up with two pancreases. That's mind-blowing.
In a way, yeah, but only the new one actually works, of course.
Right, of course. So we've talked about the donors, the surgery itself, this amazing possibility of a cure. What about the long-term outlook? What can patients expect after they recover from all this?
Oh, the good news is, with all the new medicines that help control the immune system and better surgical techniques, people are living longer after these transplants.
That's great to hear. But I imagine there are still risks, things that can go wrong after such a major surgery.
Of course, yeah. Any surgery has risks, things like bleeding, infection, and the chance that the body might reject the new organ. But the doctors, they manage all of that very carefully.
Speaking of rejection, how do they even try to prevent that from happening?
That's where those medicines we talked about come in. They help keep the immune system from attacking the new organs.
So it's a balancing act, right? You want to stop rejection, but you still need the immune system to be strong enough to fight off other stuff.
Exactly. It's a tricky balance. The doctors have to keep a close eye on things and adjust the medications over time.
Sounds like there's a lot of follow-up care involved to make this whole thing work.
It's true. Regular checkups, blood tests, staying in touch with the medical team, it's all super important for staying healthy in the long run.
So besides rejection, what other complications might pop up after a transplant?
Well, sometimes people get infections because of those medications that suppress the immune system. Remember, they're basically turning down the body's defenses a bit.
Right, makes sense. It's like a trade-off. Protect the new organs, but maybe open the door to other problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's a challenge, but doctors are always working on ways to make the treatments better and safer.
Are there any other complications that patients should be aware of?
Sometimes the transplanted pancreas or kidney, it might not work as well as hoped. Could be because of damage during the surgery or maybe even rejection.
So even after everything goes well with the transplant, it's not always a smooth ride.
True, but with good medical care, most of these complications can be managed. The key is to catch them early.
Early detection is key. Got it. So let's switch gears and talk about what this means for the patient's life. What kind of changes can they expect after they recover from the transplant?
Well, for one thing, they can say goodbye to dialysis and insulin injections. That's a huge relief for most people.
That must feel amazing, like a whole new lease on life.
It really is. They have so much more freedom and flexibility. They're not tied to all that medical equipment anymore.
What about their overall health and energy levels?
A successful transplant can make a world of difference. People often have more energy, their blood sugar is under control, and the risk of all those complications from diabetes and kidney failure goes way down.
It sounds like it can truly transform their lives.
Absolutely. It's a remarkable procedure. It gives people hope, a chance to live a much healthier life.
But I imagine going through a major surgery like this takes a toll, not just physically, but emotionally too. How do patients cope with all of that?
Yeah, it's a huge life event. It's normal to feel all sorts of emotions, anxiety, fear, even a sense of loss for the life they had before. It's a lot to process.
So it's important to pay attention to the patient's mental and emotional health, not just the physical healing.
Absolutely. Most transplant centers have support groups and therapists to help patients through all of that.
That's great to hear. It takes a village, right?
It really does. It's not just the surgeons and doctors, it's the social workers, the psychologists, the patient's loved ones, everyone working together.
Okay, let's go back in time a bit and talk about the history of all this. You mentioned before how they used to drain the pancreas into the bladder. Still can't get over that one. Why did they do that and why don't they do it anymore?
Well, you got to remember, back then, keeping an eye on rejection was a big problem. They didn't have the tools we have now.
Right.
Draining the pancreas into the bladder, well, that allowed the doctors to test the urine for a certain enzyme that meant the body was rejecting the organ.
Wow, that's creative. But I bet it wasn't very pleasant for the patients.
You got that right. It caused a lot of urinary tract infections and inflammation in the pancreas. No fun at all.
Oof, yeah, I can imagine. Thank goodness they found a better way. So how do they monitor for rejection now?
It's much simpler now. They use blood tests to look for any signs of rejection. And they can even use imaging and biopsies to check on the health of the transplanted organs.
That's a relief. It's amazing how far medical science has come.
It really is. The field of transplantation is always moving forward with new discoveries and technologies all the time.
Speaking of new technology, we mentioned islet cell transplantation earlier as an alternative to a full pancreas transplant. Can you remind me how that works again?
Sure. Islet cell transplantation is less invasive. They take the insulin-producing cells from a donor pancreas and transplant them directly into the recipient's liver.
So instead of replacing the whole organ, they just go for the specific cells that are causing the problem.
Exactly. But it's not a perfect solution. It has a lower success rate than a full pancreas transplant, and some patients might still need to take some insulin.
So it's a trade-off. Less invasive, but maybe not as effective.
That's right. And that's why it's so important for patients and doctors to really discuss all the options and choose the best one for each individual case.
Okay, feels like we've covered a lot of ground here. This deep dive has been packed with information about simultaneous kidney and pancreas transplants.
It has. We've looked at how complex it all is, the different types of donors, the risks and the benefits, and the incredible impact this procedure can have on people's lives.
It's really remarkable, and honestly, it makes you realize just how important organ donation is.
It really is. It's an amazing act of generosity that can literally give someone a second chance. We should all talk to our loved ones about our wishes when it comes to donation.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
It truly is. It's about leaving a legacy of hope and healing.
Man, we've really gone deep on this one, haven't we? From that whole draining the pancreas into the bladder thing, I still can't believe they used to do that, to these amazing procedures that can basically give someone a whole new immune system. It's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really shows you what humans can do when we put our minds to it. The constant push to make things better, to find new ways to help people in medicine. It's incredible.
You got that right. And I think it's safe to say after this deep dive that there's a lot more to a simultaneous kidney and pancreas transplant than most people realize. It's not just about the operation itself, it's about changing someone's whole life.
It's true. And there's a whole team of people involved, the surgeons, the nurses, everyone, all working together to give the patient the best shot at a healthy, happy life.
So let's take a minute to go over the key points for our listeners today. We learned that this one procedure, it can cure both diabetes and kidney failure, two really tough conditions. We talked about the different ways to get a transplant, the importance of taking good care of those new organs, and how those immunosuppressant medications, they're crucial for stopping rejection.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the care that comes after the transplant. It's not a one-and-done kind of thing. It's a lifetime commitment to staying healthy, making sure those organs do well.
It's like getting a brand new sports car, right? Super cool upgrade, but you got to take care of it if you want it to keep running smoothly. But the results, man, they can be amazing. A chance to live without being tied to dialysis and insulin injections.
Totally. It's about getting your freedom back, being able to do the things you want, and not having those medical worries hanging over your head all the time.
You know, this whole deep dive has really opened my eyes. It's made me realize that organ transplantation, it's not just about the medical stuff. It's about giving people back their lives, their hope, their dreams.
Couldn't agree more. It shows how strong people can be facing these huge challenges, and it shows how incredibly kind people can be donating their organs to give others a second chance.
It's powerful stuff. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with one last thing to think about. We talked about the different types of donors, living and deceased, and how complicated that decision can be. If you were in this situation, needing both a kidney and a pancreas transplant, what would be the most important factors in your decision? It's something to consider as we keep exploring the amazing world of medicine and all the ways it can change lives.
It's a really personal decision, and there's no easy answer. But when we understand our options, when we think about the risks and the benefits, and when we talk openly with our loved ones and the medical team, we can make the choice that's right for us and our future.
Well said. And that's what the deep dive is all about. Exploring these big topics, digging into the details, and giving you the information you need to understand the world around us.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone.